Before we begin, please be aware that this story explores themes of loss, desperation, and the unsettling nature of the unknown. Listener discretion is advised. Imagine for a moment the pit in your stomach when you realize something truly irreplaceable has vanished. Not a forgotten wallet or a misplaced heirloom. Now amplify that feeling 1,000 times. Envision it for a person you love more than anything suddenly gone, leaving behind only an echoing silence and a void that threatens to swallow your entire world. For David Miller, that nightmare became his waking reality. David was a man who built algorithms, debugged code, and believed in logic and reason above all else. His world was orderly, predictable, a series of solvable problems, until his younger sister, Emily, simply ceased to exist. Emily wasn't just a sister. She was his anchor, his confidant, the vibrant, laughing spark in his otherwise structured life. She was his last surviving family, his connection to a shared past, and his hope for a future. Her disappearance wasn't a runaway. There was no note, no argument, no warning. One evening she was there, curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, teasing him about his late-night coding habits. The next morning her bed was empty, perfectly made. Her phone sat charging on her nightstand, untouched. The front door of their shared apartment was locked from the inside. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, just nothing. An absence so profound it felt like a physical wound, a piece of his own soul ripped away. The initial police investigation was thorough, yet frustratingly fruitless. Detectives Jessica Chun and Michael Rodriguez were professional, empathetic even, but their methods were bound by evidence, by logic. They checked security footage from their building and surrounding blocks, interviewed neighbors, traced Emily's last known digital footprints. Every lead, every faint possibility, evaporated into thin air. "People don't just vanish, David," Detective Chun had said, her voice laced with a weary resignation that offered no comfort. But Emily had. She had simply become a ghost in a locked room, a paradox that haunted David's every waking moment. Weeks bled into months. David's world crumbled. His logical mind, once so sharp, was shattered by the incomprehensible. He quit his job, unable to focus on anything but the gnawing emptiness. He spent every waking moment chasing ghosts, following dead-end leads, interviewing anyone who had ever met Emily, desperately hoping for a forgotten detail, a misplaced word, anything that might open a door. He plunged into the darkest corners of the internet, forums dedicated to missing persons, true crime subreddits, conspiracy theories. He was looking for anything that might offer a shred of hope, a fragment of an answer, a whisper of a possibility. It was there, buried deep in a forgotten thread on an encrypted forum, a place where people traded desperate theories and even more desperate pleas, that he first saw it. A whisper, a legend, a name spoken only by those who had exhausted every other option, a desperate prayer in the digital wilderness. The Seeker. It was described as a search engine, but unlike anything he, a seasoned tech professional, had ever encountered. This one didn't index the known web. It didn't find information. It found lost things. Not just data, but physical objects. Irreplaceable heirlooms. Long-vanished pets. Even so, the whispers claimed people. David dismissed it at first. A cruel hoax. A sophisticated scam designed to prey on the vulnerable, the grief-stricken. His analytical mind screamed against the impossibility. But as time wore on and the official channels offered nothing but platitudes and closed cases, as Emily's face on the missing posters began to fade under the relentless sun and rain, the whisper of the Seeker grew louder in his mind, an insidious siren song promising a miracle. His desperation, a raw, aching beast, began to overpower his skepticism. He started digging, cautiously at first, then with a frantic, all-consuming intensity. It was almost impossible to find information about the Seeker using regular search engines. It was designed to remain hidden from the indexed world, a ghost in the machine, a shadow in the deepest recesses of the digital realm. The few mentions he found were cryptic, veiled in allegory and coded language. Anonymous users claiming impossible finds. A lost family photograph from a childhood home long demolished. A pet vanished decades ago in a freak storm. A forgotten memory from early childhood rendered into a vivid, undeniable image. Each impossible claim fueled his desperate hope. There were warnings too. Dark, unsettling implications that clung to the edges of the stories like shadows. That finding what was lost often came with a price. that some things were perhaps better left unfound, that the act of seeking could itself transform the seeker. Some spoke of an unsettling sense of being watched, of strange coincidences following their successful searches. Others warned of a subtle shift in reality, a feeling that the world had become just a little bit off after their lost item was returned. One particularly unsettling post, now deleted, mentioned a user who found a childhood toy, only to discover the toy had always been there, but its presence felt fundamentally wrong, as if it had been reinserted into a timeline where it didn't belong. These weren't just warnings of danger. They were warnings of existential unease, of a reality subtly, terrifyingly altered. But David was beyond warnings. He was beyond fear. He just needed Emily. He had to find Emily. His search for the seeker led him down rabbit holes so deep they felt like another dimension. Through layers of VPNs, Tor browsers, and encrypted messaging apps, he navigated a labyrinth of digital shadows. He encountered digital gatekeepers, riddles that tested his sanity, and tests of his resolve that pushed him to the brink of collapse. Each step felt like entering a forbidden realm, designed to deter all but the truly desperate. He spent weeks navigating this digital underworld, sacrificing sleep, sanity, and every ounce of his dwindling savings. He sold his car, liquidated his small investment portfolio. He became a ghost himself, living off instant noodles and lukewarm coffee, his apartment a shrine to Emily's memory and a command center for his impossible quest. Then late one night, a breakthrough. Not an advertisement, not a public link. It was an email, sent to an obscure burner address he'd only used for his deepest dive into the lost communities. The subject line was blank. The sender was an unidentifiable string of alphanumeric characters. The body of the email contained a single, chillingly simple question. What have you lost? Below that, a string of code. Not a URL, but a command line interface. A gateway. A digital key to a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open. David stared at it, his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the pervasive silence of his apartment. This was it. The seeker. Or at least the invitation to it. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that stepping through this digital door meant stepping into an unknown far stranger and more dangerous than any grief he had ever known. A world where the rules of reality might bend, or break entirely. But he also knew, with an even deeper, more primal conviction, that he had no choice. Emily was waiting, somewhere, and the seeker promised to find her. The cursor, a single unwavering vertical line, pulsed on the stark black screen. Michael's breath hitched in his throat. He had found the link buried deep in a forum known for its urban legends and conspiracy theories, a place he frequented in the desperate, early days after Emily vanished, hoping against hope for any hint, any whisper, anything at all. The link itself was just a string of seemingly random characters, impossible to memorize, leading to an IP address that seemed to shift with every refresh. But now he was here. The interface of the seeker was nothing like any search engine he had ever encountered. There was no logo, no "I'm feeling lucky" button, no trending topics. Just that black screen, and in the very center a single unassuming text field devoid of any prompt. It felt less like a tool and more like an abyss waiting to be filled. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. What did he even type? Emily Williams? Where is Emily Williams? The questions felt too mundane, too human for this alien portal. He closed his eyes, picturing Emily's face, her infectious smile, the way her hair caught the light when she laughed. He focused on the feeling of her absence, the gaping hole in his life. He needed to convey not just a name but a loss. When he opened his eyes, his fingers moved, almost independently. He typed, not a question but a statement, a declaration of his deepest desire, stripped bare. Emily Williams. Lost. Beloved. He pressed enter. The screen didn't flash, didn't load in stages. It simply changed. The blackness remained, but now faint, shimmering lines of what looked like constellations began to spiderweb across the display, coalescing slowly into an intricate, impossible map. It wasn't a geographical map, not one he recognized. It was a swirling nebula of data points, each a pinprick of light, some pulsing softly, others burning with an ethereal glow. And in the very center, larger and brighter than the rest, was a single intensely luminous point. A soft, almost imperceptible hum seemed to emanate from his speakers, a sound that vibrated not just in his ears, but deep within his chest. Text began to materialize around the central point, Not scrolling like search results, but appearing in fragments, like whispers coalescing into words. The first line was simple, yet devastatingly precise. Emily and Williams, born May 14, 1992, disappeared October 27, 2023. Michael felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was public information, yes, but the way it appeared, without context, without source, felt invasive. Then the next line appeared, and his heart lurched. Last known location: Willow Creek State Park, hiking trailhead, 3:17 p.m. This was the official police report's last known location. He knew this. He had been there countless times, walking the same paths, calling her name until his voice was raw. But then the next fragment materialized, and the world tilted on its axis. Trace residue. Subatomic signature detected near coordinates 40.7128 degrees north, 74.0060 degrees W. Michael stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process. Subatomic signature? Coordinates? He quickly typed the numbers into a standard map application on his phone. His breath caught. Those coordinates weren't Willow Creek State Park. They weren't even in his state. They were in New York City. The Statue of Liberty. He scrambled, rechecking the numbers, convinced he had made a mistake. But no, the coordinates were clear. What did a subatomic signature mean? And why the Statue of Liberty? Emily had no connection to New York City. She hated big cities. Her idea of a perfect weekend was a cabin in the woods, or a quiet beach. More text appeared, now forming into what looked like a series of fragmented files, each labeled with a cryptic string of letters and numbers. He clicked on the largest, brightest one, his hand shaking. A single image filled the screen. It was blurry, grainy, as if captured by a security camera from a great distance, or through a distorting lens. But Michael would recognize her anywhere. It was Emily. She was standing on what looked like a ferry deck, her back slightly to the camera, looking out over water. The image was dark, the lighting poor, but the distinctive cut of her jacket, the way her hair was tied back, the slight slump of her shoulders, it was her. And in the background, unmistakable even in the low resolution, was the silhouette of the Statue of Liberty. Michael gasped, a raw choke sound. It wasn't possible. The police had searched for weeks, months. They had checked every security camera within a 100-mile radius of Willow Creek. They had interviewed everyone. She had simply vanished. Yet here she was on a ferry in New York, sometime after her disappearance. He noticed a small timestamp in the corner of the image, barely visible. 2023-11-0310:48 a.m. November 3rd. That was a week after she disappeared from Willow Creek. A week after his world had ended. A week after the police had declared her missing, presumed lost in the wilderness, possibly a tragic accident or worse. But this image proved she was alive, or had been a week later, and in a completely different state. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over him. Elation, terror, profound confusion. Elation because she was there, she was real, she was captured on film. Terror because how did she get there? Why was she there? And why hadn't anyone found this? Why hadn't the police? He scrolled down, desperate for more. The next result was not an image, but a snippet of text, appearing in a different, almost archaic font. Witness account unverified, saw a girl, looked lost, talking to herself near the docks. Said something about the current and a wrong turn. Wearing a green jacket. Green jacket. Emily's favorite hiking jacket was green. Michael's heart pounded. This was too specific, too real. This wasn't some random internet hoax. This was information. But who was this witness? Where was this account from? The seeker offered no source, no link, no context. It simply presented the data, stark and unadorned. The next result was even stranger. It was a partial audio file, barely a few seconds long. When he clicked it, a burst of static filled the room, followed by a faint, distorted whisper. The path it shifted. The voice was undeniably Emily's. Her cadence, the slight rasp she sometimes got when she was tired or stressed. Michael froze, every nerve ending screaming. He played it again and again, trying to decipher the faint words. The path it shifted. It sounded like she was in distress or utterly bewildered. And the phrase itself, the path it shifted, it made no sense. What path? How could a path shift? He felt a cold dread settle in, deeper and more pervasive than before. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. This was something else entirely. The subatomic signature, the impossible journey, the cryptic whisper. It was almost as if Emily hadn't just gotten lost, but had somehow stepped out of reality or into another one. He looked at the coordinates again. 40.7128 degrees north, 74.0060 degrees west. The Statue of Liberty, and the image of Emily on the ferry, heading towards it or away from it. He zoomed in on the constellation map on the seeker's screen. The bright central point, Emily, was connected by a shimmering, almost invisible thread to another cluster of light, much fainter, near the location of the statue. But there were other threads too, branching off into the swirling nebula, leading to places he couldn't identify, points of light that pulsed with a strange, unsettling rhythm. He felt a sudden, profound loneliness, an isolation even greater than the grief he'd endured. He was holding on to a secret, a truth that no one else would believe. How could he tell Detective Miller that a hidden search engine had shown him a blurry photo of Emily on a ferry in New York, a week after she vanished from a hiking trail, and given him an audio clip of her whispering about a shifting path? They would think he was losing his mind, that grief had finally pushed him over the edge. But the evidence, however bizarre, was right there. He saw Emily. He heard her voice. The seeker had found her. Or at least, it had found traces of her, echoes of her journey. His eyes darted back to the witness account, the one about her talking to herself, saying something about the current and a wrong turn. A wrong turn on a path that shifted. It sounded like a riddle, a fragmented clue from a dream. He knew what he had to do. He had to go to New York, to the Statue of Liberty. He had to retrace Emily's impossible steps. The fear was immense, a cold hand squeezing his heart, but it was overshadowed by a surge of desperate hope. Emily was out there, and the seeker had given him a thread to follow. A thread that led not just across state lines but perhaps across the very fabric of what he understood as reality. He had no idea what he would find, what dangers lurked in the wake of such a strange disappearance. But for the first time in months he had a direction. And that was enough to make him stand up, grab his jacket and head for the door. The journey to Emily, wherever and whenever she was, had just begun. Michael's first step was to return to the familiar, the mundane, the internet he knew. He typed Dr. Eris Thorne into a standard search engine. The results were immediate but sparse. An old faculty page from a defunct research institute, a few obscure academic papers on theoretical physics, and a single grainy photograph of a man with intense eyes and disheveled hair. The institute, the Ether Research Group, had apparently dissolved over a decade ago. Its website was a ghost, a digital ruin. Next, Project Kronos. This yielded even less. A few mentions in archive science forums, speculative threads discussing fringe theories, and one official-looking document. A proposal for a grant application from the Ether Research Group, dated 15 years prior, outlining a project focused on temporal mechanics and localized field manipulation. The proposal had been rejected. Officially, at least. Michael felt a chill. Temporal mechanics. Localized field manipulation. The words echoed the temporal displacement Nexus had spat out. Was it possible? Could Emily have truly moved through time? He scoffed internally. It was absurd. He was a pragmatic man, an engineer. Time travel was science fiction, not a plausible explanation for a missing person. Yet Nexus had never been wrong. He spent the next 2 days in a blur of caffeine and frantic research. He scoured academic databases, government archives, even old newspaper clippings. He tried variations: Eris Thorne disappearance, Project Kronos scandal, Ether Research Group closure. Nothing substantial emerged. Thorne seemed to have simply faded from public view after Ether's dissolution. No obituaries, no new publications, no record of him working elsewhere. It was as if he'd been scrubbed from existence. The frustration gnawed at him. The Nexus had given him names, a project, a direction, but the conventional world offered only dead ends and whispers of forgotten science. He kept coming back to that rejected grant proposal. It was the most concrete link. It mentioned a lead researcher, a Dr. Elena Petrova, who had co-authored the proposal with Thorne. Her name, unlike Thorne's, still showed some faint activity. A LinkedIn profile, recently updated, listed her as a senior physicist at a private research firm, Omni Dynamics, located in a quiet industrial park an hour outside the city. This was a lead, a real tangible person. Michael felt a flicker of hope, a fragile flame against the darkness of his despair. He drafted an email, carefully crafting his words. He couldn't mention Nexus or the temporal displacement. He needed to sound credible, concerned but not delusional. He introduced himself as a family friend of Emily's, deeply worried about her disappearance, and explained he'd stumbled upon Dr. Petrova's name in connection with an old research project that Emily had expressed a passing interest in. It was a flimsy excuse, but the best he could manage. He sent the email, then waited. The hours stretched into an eternity. He checked his inbox every 5 minutes, his heart pounding with each notification, only to be met with disappointment. Finally, late that evening, a reply. It was curt, professional. Dr. Petrova expressed her sympathies regarding Emily's disappearance. She politely stated that she had no recollection of Emily, nor any knowledge of her having an interest in Project Kronos. She concluded by wishing him luck with his search and requested no further contact. Michael slumped in his chair. Another dead end. He stared at the screen, the rejection burning into his eyes. But then he noticed something. A subtle detail. The email had been sent from a private, encrypted server. Not OmniDynamics corporate email, but a personal address, one with an unusual domain name. And at the very bottom, almost hidden in the signature, was a single italicized word, Kronos. It was a breadcrumb. A deliberate, almost defiant breadcrumb. Dr. Petrova knew something. She was being evasive, but she was also reaching out subtly. Why? Was she afraid? Was she involved? The next morning, Michael drove to OmniDynamics. He didn't have an appointment, just a desperate hope. The building was sleek, modern, with tinted windows that reflected the overcast sky. He walked into the sterile lobby, past a polite but firm receptionist who informed him that Dr. Petrova was unavailable and did not take unscheduled meetings. Michael tried to explain, to plead, but it was like talking to a wall. He left his contact information, knowing it was futile. As he walked back to his car defeated, he saw her. Dr. Elena Petrova. She was leaving the building through a side entrance, holding a small nondescript bag. She was older than her LinkedIn photo suggested, her hair streaked with silver, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond age. She moved with a quiet urgency, her gaze darting around as if expecting someone. Michael's heart leaped. This was his chance. He called out her name. She flinched, her eyes locking onto him. For a fleeting moment he saw fear, raw and undisguised, before she composed herself. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice low, strained. "I told you I can't help you." "Please, Dr. Petrova," Michael pleaded, catching up to her. "Emily is gone. I just need to understand. What is Project Kronos? What does it have to do with Dr. Thorne? And why did you sign your email with that word?" She hesitated, her gaze sweeping the empty parking lot. "This isn't safe," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be asking these questions." "I have to," Michael insisted, desperation making him bold. "Emily is everything to me. Nexus told me about Thorne and Kronos. It's the only lead I have." Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock. "Nexus," she breathed, the name a sacred, forbidden word. How do you know about Nexus?" "It found Emily," Michael said, simplifying the truth. "It gave me those names." Dr. Petrova stared at him, a complex mix of fear, recognition, and something akin to a desperate plea in her eyes. "You need to forget Nexus. Forget Thorne. Forget Kronos," she said, her voice firm now, though still quiet. "Walk away, Mr. Miller. For your own good." "I can't," Michael said, shaking his head. "Not until I find Emily. If you know something, anything, you have to tell me." She sighed, a heavy, resigned sound. "This isn't a game, Mr. Miller. This isn't theoretical physics anymore. Thorne, he went too far. And Kronos, it wasn't just a rejected proposal. It was real. Too real." She glanced over her shoulder again, her paranoia palpable. "Meet me tomorrow. Midnight. The old observatory on Blackwood Hill. Come alone. And don't tell anyone you're meeting me. If anyone finds out, we're both in danger." With that, she slipped into a dark sedan that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, its engine already running. The car sped away, leaving Michael standing alone in the desolate parking lot, the wind whipping around him. Blackwood Hill. The old observatory. A clandestine meeting in the dead of night. It felt like something out of a spy novel. Not the path to finding his lost wife. But the fear in Dr. Petrova's eyes, the urgency in her voice, they were real. And the way she had reacted to the name Nexus, it confirmed his growing suspicion. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was something far, far stranger. Something dangerous. He looked up at the sky, already darkening, a few stars beginning to pierce through the twilight. Emily was out there somewhere. And tomorrow night, he would take another step into the abyss, hoping to find her. The journey to Emily had just gotten infinitely more perilous. The journey to Emily had just gotten infinitely more perilous. The next day dawned with a heavy, oppressive quiet. Michael felt it in his bones. A dull ache that wasn't just physical exhaustion, but the weight of a secret world unfolding around him. He spent the day in a haze, the mundane tasks of life feeling utterly pointless. His mind replayed the chilling message from the journal, the unsettling silence of the abandoned warehouse. Emily was involved in something far deeper than he had imagined, and the search engine, his beacon of hope, was also pulling him into its dangerous orbit. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, Michael felt the familiar tremor of anticipation, mingled now with a palpable dread. He ate a quick, tasteless meal, his stomach churning, then retreated to his office. The laptop sat like a silent, waiting oracle. He stared at the screen, the cursor blinking patiently on the search bar. Emily. He typed her name again, his fingers trembling slightly. The familiar whirring began, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. The screen flickered, the kaleidoscope of colors danced, and then slowly, a new result materialized. It wasn't an object this time. It wasn't another cryptic message. It was a name. Daniel Thorne. And below it, a location. The Cedar Ridge Observatory abandoned. Michael's breath hitched. Daniel Thorne. The name meant absolutely nothing to him. Had Emily ever mentioned a Daniel? He racked his brain, searching through years of shared memories, conversations, old photo albums. Nothing. It was a blank slate. Who was this man? And why was the search engine pointing him to an abandoned observatory? He immediately launched into a frantic online search for Daniel Thorne. It was harder than he expected. There were dozens of Daniel Thornes, of course, but none that seemed to fit. He refined his search, adding Cedar Ridge, Observatory, Astronomy. Slowly, pieces began to emerge. A few archived local newspaper articles from 15 years ago. Daniel Thorne, a local astronomy enthusiast, had been instrumental in founding the Cedar Ridge Observatory, a small, privately funded facility on the outskirts of town. He was described as brilliant, eccentric, a recluse even then, obsessed with the stars. The observatory had operated for a few years, then abruptly shut down after Thorne's sudden disappearance. The articles were vague, hinting at financial troubles, but mostly focused on the mystery of Thorne himself. No body was ever found. He simply vanished. Michael felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Another lost person. Was the search engine connecting him to a network of disappearances? Was Emily tangled in something far bigger than just her own individual vanishing act? He pulled up maps, locating the Cedar Ridge Observatory. It was deep in the national forest, accessible only by a winding, unpaved road that snaked through dense woodland. Remote, isolated, the perfect place for secrets to fester, for mysteries to deepen. He knew what he had to do. The next night, he would go to Cedar Ridge. The drive was long, the silence of the forest pressing in on him. His headlights cut through the inky blackness, illuminating towering pines that seemed to lean in, whispering secrets. The gravel road eventually gave way to a deeply rutted, overgrown track that was barely passable. Michael's old sedan groaned in protest, but he pushed it onward, his determination overriding his growing unease. The air grew colder, thinner, as he ascended into the mountains. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the trees parted, revealing a clearing. And there it was, the Cedar Ridge Observatory. It was a skeleton of a building, a domed structure slowly being reclaimed by nature. Vines snaked up its crumbling walls, windows were shattered, and the once gleaming telescope dome was now a rusted, gaping maw against the star-strewn sky. A profound sense of desolation hung in the air, a graveyard of forgotten dreams. Michael cut the engine, plunging the clearing into absolute darkness, save for the faint glow of the distant city lights diffused by the forest. He sat for a moment listening. The wind rustled through the leaves, a lonely hoot owl called in the distance. Nothing else. He grabbed his flashlight, a small backpack, and his phone, its GPS signal already weak. Stepping out of the car, the cold mountain air bit at his exposed skin. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. The ground was littered with fallen branches and sharp stones. He walked slowly, cautiously, towards the observatory's entrance. The heavy wooden door hung askew on one hinge, groaning softly in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with dust, damp earth, and the faint metallic tang of decay. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a scene of utter abandonment. Old rickety tables were strewn with yellowed papers, rusted tools, and what looked like a shattered piece of glass from a lens. A large chalkboard still had faint, chalk-drawn equations scrawled across it, half erased. The sense of a life abruptly interrupted was overwhelming. Michael moved deeper into the building, his footsteps echoing eerily. He found the main observation room, the dome above him open to the night sky, a few broken pieces of the massive telescope still jutting out like skeletal fingers. He scanned the room, looking for anything that might connect Daniel Thorne to Emily. He noticed a small, cluttered office tucked away in a corner, behind a makeshift partition. It was even more chaotic than the main room. Books on astronomy, physics, and obscure mathematics were piled high, some moldering, others gnawed by rodents. He began sifting through them, his hands getting grimy with dust and grit. Old notebooks, filled with meticulous observations of stars and constellations, were stacked on a desk. They were Daniel Thorne's, no doubt. The handwriting was precise, almost obsessive. Then, buried beneath a stack of star charts that seemed to depict constellations Michael didn't recognize, he found it. A small leather-bound journal. It was unlike the others, newer, its cover bearing no title, no author. It felt out of place, almost deliberately hidden. His heart pounded as he opened it. The first few entries were mundane, observations about the weather, casual thoughts. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting, though still Thorne's, grew more erratic, more desperate. He wrote about the anomaly, the whispers from beyond, and the patterns in the void. He spoke of a mathematical sequence, a code that could pierce the veil. Michael's fingers trembled as he turned the page. And there, scrawled across a 2-page spread, was a familiar diagram. It was crude, hastily drawn but unmistakable. The intricate, swirling symbol he'd seen on the search engine's loading screen. The same symbol he'd seen burned into the wooden box in the old warehouse. Thorne called it the Navigator. Below the diagram, written in a different hand, a hand Michael recognized with a sickening lurch, was a single chilling sentence. Asterisk, we're so close, Daniel. The algorithm is almost complete. Emily. Asterisk. Michael gasped, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. Emily. Her handwriting. She had been here. With Daniel Thorne. Working on this. The Navigator. The algorithm. The search engine. He flipped through more pages, frantic now. Thorne's entries became increasingly paranoid, detailing strange signals, voices, and the feeling of being watched. He wrote about a network, a collective consciousness, that existed outside their dimension, and how the Navigator was the key to communicating with it, to drawing things from it. Lost things. Then a sudden sharp crack echoed from the main observatory room, like a branch snapping underfoot. Michael froze, his flashlight beam fixed on the journal. He wasn't alone. Someone else was here. He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs, his breath catching in his throat. He clicked off his flashlight, plunging himself into near-total darkness, relying on the faint starlight filtering through the dome. He heard a soft shuffle, a low creak of the floorboards. They were close. Clutching the journal, Michael pressed himself against the wall, straining his ears. The air grew colder, a prickling sensation on his skin. He realized with a horrifying certainty that Emily hadn't just been lost. She had been involved, deeply involved. And whatever she and Daniel Thorne had unleashed, whatever Navigator they had built, had consequences. Consequences that were now hunting him. He heard a low, raspy whisper from just outside the office partition. It wasn't a voice he recognized. It wasn't a language he understood. It sounded ancient, alien, and utterly terrifying. Michael felt a primal urge to flee, to scream, but he was paralyzed by fear. He realized that the search engine wasn't just a tool to find his lost love. It was a doorway, and something had just stepped through. The air in Michael's small apartment thickened, growing heavy and cold, like the sudden descent into an ancient tomb. The light from his monitor, once a beacon of hope, now seemed to warp and bend around the impossible shape that had manifested. It wasn't a shadow, not truly, but a tear in the fabric of reality, a shimmering void that pulsed with an internal unseen light. It had no discernible features, no eyes or mouth, yet Michael felt an intense, predatory gaze upon him, a silent scream resonating directly in his skull. His breath hitched, caught in a throat suddenly dry and constricted. Every nerve ending in his body screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything. But he was rooted to his chair, his muscles locked in an agonizing rictus of fear. The entity before him wasn't just a physical presence, it was a psychological assault. It seemed to drain the very color from the room, leaving only a muted, sickly gray. The familiar posters on his wall, the stack of books on his desk, the coffee mug he'd left half-finished, they all seemed to recede, becoming distant and unreal. The only thing that mattered, the only thing that was the impossible horror now occupying his living space. He could feel a tremor in the floorboards, a low hum that vibrated through his bones, not from the entity itself, but from the sheer disruption of its presence. It smelled of ozone and something else, something metallic and acrid, like burnt copper mixed with the scent of a forgotten, dusty attic. His ears strained, but there was no sound, only that oppressive, mind-numbing silence that was far worse than any scream. The entity shifted, or rather, the space around it rippled, drawing closer without seeming to move. It was like watching a mirage solidify, then melt, then reform, each iteration more unsettling than the last. Michael's mind, in a desperate attempt to protect itself, tried to categorize it, to label it, to make it comprehensible. But it defied all logic, all known biology, all physics. It was a living paradox, a nightmare made manifest, and it was here because Michael had called it. A tendril not of flesh or bone, but of pure, distilled darkness, extended from the shifting mass. It was impossibly thin, yet solid enough to distort the light around it, making the air shimmer as if seen through rising heat. It moved with agonizing slowness inexorably towards Michael's monitor. He wanted to shout, to swat it away, to protect the screen that held the last vestiges of his hope. But he couldn't. His body was a cage of terror, his will utterly subjugated by the ancient, alien force before him. The tendril touched the screen, not with a physical impact, but with a subtle, horrifying resonance. The images on the monitor, the final desperate search results for Sarah, began to glitch. Pixels fractured, colors inverted, and the familiar text dissolved into a chaotic scramble of symbols Michael didn't recognize. They looked like hieroglyphs, but ones that writhed and pulsed, alien characters from a language never meant for human eyes. Then the chaos resolved. Not into Sarah's face, not into a location, but into a series of images that flashed across the screen with blinding speed, searing themselves into Michael's mind. They were not photographs. They were impressions, fragments of a reality that twisted and buckled. He saw vast, cavernous spaces, lit by an eerie phosphorescent glow, stretching into infinity. He saw impossible structures, built from materials that seemed to defy gravity and dimension, shimmering with an inner light that was both beautiful and utterly terrifying. And then he saw figures. Not human, not animal, but something in between, tall and slender, with elongated limbs and heads that were too smooth, too featureless, their forms blurring at the edges as if they were not entirely present. A wave of nausea washed over Michael, a sickening certainty blooming in his gut. This was where Sarah was. This was what the search engine had found. Not a place on Earth, not a hidden locale, but an entirely different plane of existence, a realm beyond human comprehension. And it was horrifying. The images flickered again, faster this time, becoming more disturbing. He saw what looked like human forms or remnants of them, suspended in amber-like cocoons within those impossible structures. Their faces were serene, yet utterly blank, their eyes staring into nothingness. And among them, for a fleeting, soul-crushing instant, Michael saw a face that was achingly familiar. Sarah. Her hair, her jawline, the faint mole above her lip. But her eyes were vacant, her skin pale, and her expression was one of profound, eternal peace, a peace that felt more like oblivion. It wasn't just an image on a screen anymore. The vision was projected directly into his mind, bypassing his eyes, his ears, his very senses. He felt Sarah's emptiness, her serene detachment, as if it were his own. He felt the cold, alien calm of that place, the profound silence, the sense of being utterly, irrevocably lost to anything human. A guttural sound escaped Michael's throat, a strangled cry of despair and horror. He finally broke free from his paralysis, a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. His hand shot out, not to fight the entity but to shut down the computer, to sever this horrifying connection. His fingers fumbled for the power button, pressing it repeatedly, desperately. Nothing. The screen remained locked, the image of Sarah's vacant face now dominating the display, growing larger, more vivid, as if she were staring directly into his soul. He tried to yank the power cord from the wall. His fingers, trembling violently, missed it once, twice. On the third attempt he grasped the plug, pulling with all his might. It held fast, stuck as if fused to the socket. The entity made no movement, no sound, but Michael felt its consciousness pressing against his. A cold, vast intelligence that was slowly, methodically, dissecting his every thought, every memory. You sought what was lost, a thought echoed in his mind, not in words but in a wave of pure information, a concept so profound it threatened to shatter his sanity. Lost things do not simply vanish. They are collected. They are preserved. Michael stumbled backward, knocking his chair over with a crash that seemed deafening in the unnatural silence. He scrabbled away, crawling on his hands and knees, his eyes fixed on the screen on Sarah's face. The entity remained by the computer, its tendrils still connected to the monitor, a silent, unmoving sentinel. She is not gone, Michael. She is found. The thought resonated again, colder, sharper this time. She is part of the collection. Perfect specimen. Preserved from the ravages of your fleeting reality. Michael gasped for air, his lungs burning. Preserved? Was that what this was? A cosmic archive, a museum of the lost? And Sarah was an exhibit? The horror of it was unbearable. He remembered the search engine's promise. Find anything lost. It hadn't said retrieve it. It hadn't said return it. It had simply said find. And it had. It had found her in a place worse than death. A place of eternal, serene imprisonment. The entity's form began to coalesce further, the impossible geometry sharpening at its edges. It was no longer just a distortion. A central mass, impossibly large and dark, began to form like a vast ancient eye that had just opened. And within that eye, Michael saw a swirling vortex of stars and nebulae, a miniature universe contained within the impossible being. You opened the door, Michael. You called to the collection, and now the collection calls back. The tendril retracted from the screen, and the image of Sarah's face vanished, replaced by the familiar search bar, now pulsing with a faint, malevolent red light. The entity turned its vast, dark eye, focusing entirely on Michael. The air grew colder still, so cold it burned, and Michael could see his own breath misting in front of him. You sought a connection. You found it. Now you must pay the toll. A new image flashed across the screen, not search results, but a single chilling question, written in the same alien script that had briefly appeared before, now translated into English, directly into Michael's mind. What are you willing to lose to get her back? The entity took a step, or rather, the space around Michael seemed to compress, bringing the impossible horror closer. It was no longer just an observer, no longer content to simply reveal. It was demanding. It was waiting. And Michael knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that the price was not going to be money or possessions, or even a simple sacrifice. The price was going to be something far more fundamental, something that would tear at the very fabric of his being. The doorway hadn't just revealed Sarah's location. It had opened for him, and the collection was ready to add another item. Michael staggered back from the screen, his chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor. The image of the swirling obsidian threshold seemed to burn itself into his retinas, even as his eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that wasn't there. His breath hitched in his throat, a raw, ragged sound that echoed the frantic beating of his heart. The collection was ready to add him. Denial, a desperate, flimsy shield, was the first instinct. It was a trick, a hallucination, a cruel joke played by his own sleep-deprived mind. He'd been staring at a screen for days, haunted by guilt, driven by a desperate hope. He was cracking under the pressure. That had to be it. He lunged forward, hand trembling as he reached for the power button on his monitor. If he just shut it off, if he just unplugged the computer, it would all disappear. The glow, the sinister implications, the icy tendrils of fear coiling in his gut, all gone. His fingers fumbled, brushing against the cool plastic. But before he could press it, the screen flickered. The obsidian doorway didn't vanish. Instead, it seemed to deepen, the swirling blackness pulling inward, creating a terrifying illusion of infinite space beyond the glass. And then a whisper. Not a sound he heard with his ears, but a thought that blossomed, cold and sharp, directly in the center of his mind. "It's too late, Michael." He recoiled, stumbling backwards until his shoulders hit the wall with a dull thud. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen, a silent scream trapped behind clenched teeth. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't a trick. This was real. The search engine, the one that found lost things, wasn't just a program. It was a predator. And he was the prey. His gaze flickered to the taskbar at the bottom of his screen. The familiar icon for the search engine, a stylized compass needle pointing to a question mark, pulsed with a faint, internal light. It wasn't just open in his browser. It was active, humming with a malevolent energy that seemed to permeate the very air in his apartment. He had to get rid of it. Delete it. Burn the computer. He scrambled back to his desk, ignoring the tremor in his hands. He forced himself to focus, his mind a whirlwind of panic and a desperate need for action. He opened the task manager, his fingers flying across the keyboard, though each key press felt heavy, sluggish. He found the browser process, the one running the search engine. He selected it. End task. Nothing happened. The browser window remained open, the obsidian doorway still swirling on his screen, mocking his futile attempt. He tried again, and again. The task manager reported the process was terminated, but the browser persisted, an unkillable digital ghost. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to close the browser window directly, clicking the X icon. The cursor moved, hovered over the X, but when he clicked, nothing happened. It was as if the window itself had become an unyielding part of the monitor, a permanent fixture. He yanked the Ethernet cable from the back of his computer. The connection icon in the corner of his screen immediately registered, no internet access. A sliver of hope, quickly extinguished. The search engine, the doorway, remained. It wasn't just an online tool. It had embedded itself. It was here. He stared at the screen, his reflection a pale, terrified mask superimposed over the swirling abyss. What does "add another item" mean? The question screamed in his mind. Was he going to be lost like Sarah? But Sarah was physical. Sarah was a person. What could this thing take from him? A sudden sharp chill permeated the room, despite the late summer warmth outside. It felt like the air itself was thinning, growing colder, heavier. The light from his desk lamp seemed to dim, though he hadn't touched the switch. The shadows in the corners of his room deepened, stretching, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to writhe at the periphery of his vision. He stood up slowly, his muscles screaming with tension. His eyes never left the screen. The obsidian doorway was subtly changing. It wasn't just a static image anymore. The edges of the swirling blackness seemed to ripple outwards, like ink bleeding into water, subtly encroaching on the pristine white background of the browser window. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the floorboards, a sound so deep it felt more like a vibration in his bones than something he heard with his ears. It intensified, making the small trinkets on his desk rattle faintly. The framed photograph of him and Sarah, smiling brightly on a beach trip, shivered precariously on its stand. Michael snatched it up, clutching it to his chest, as if the physical act could protect the memory, protect Sarah. He felt an overwhelming urge to call someone, anyone. His sister, Emily, his best friend, David. But his phone, lying on the desk beside his now-possessed computer, felt miles away, an unreachable lifeline. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that even if he reached it, even if he dialed, no one would answer. Or worse, the entity would be on the other end. He backed away from the desk again, his gaze sweeping the room. The shadows were more pronounced now, like living things clinging to the walls, stretching long skeletal fingers towards him. He could almost feel a pressure in the room, a subtle, suffocating weight that pressed down on his chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The hum from the floorboards grew louder, morphing into a low guttural growl that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. It was the sound of something vast, something ancient stirring to life. The obsidian doorway on his screen pulsed in rhythm with the growl, its blackness now seeming to absorb the light from the room, making the monitor a void, a hungry mouth. The collection. The words echoed in his mind, carrying a new, terrifying implication. It wasn't just about taking him. It was about what it took. Was it his memories? His identity? His very soul? He remembered the stories of lost objects, the things people searched for. Heirlooms, photographs, forgotten letters. Were they all collected somewhere, stored in this digital abyss, their essence fueling this monstrous entity? He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to open his closet. He fought it, a cold dread washing over him. What would he find there? He didn't want to know. But the urge persisted, a nagging compulsion that felt alien, not his own. It was like a puppet master was tugging at his strings. He forced himself to look away from the screen, forcing his attention to the closet door. It was a simple wooden door, unremarkable. But now, in the deepening gloom, it seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light, mirroring the search engine icon. "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "Get out of my head." The growl intensified, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor and up into his feet. The air grew colder, so cold he could see his breath fogging faintly in front of him. He could feel eyes on him, not just from the screen but from the shadows, from the very walls of his apartment. He started to walk backward, slowly, cautiously, towards the front door. His only thought was escape. Get out of the apartment. Get away from the computer. Away from it. He reached the door, his hand fumbling for the doorknob. His fingers closed around the cold metal, twisting. It didn't budge. He twisted harder, pulling, pushing. Locked. It was always unlocked. He never locked it during the day. Panic flared, hotter and sharper than before. He slammed his shoulder against the door. Nothing. He tried again, putting all his weight into it. The door remained stubbornly shut, as if fused to the frame. He looked down at the lock. It was a simple deadbolt, but now a faint, almost invisible filigree of what looked like dark, swirling energy seemed to trace its outline. He turned back to face the room, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The computer screen was now almost entirely black, the obsidian doorway having swallowed the white background. It pulsed with a deep, hungry light. The hum was deafening, a roar in his ears. And then he saw it. On his desk, where the photo of him and Sarah had been, a single antique watch now lay. It wasn't his. He'd never seen it before. It was old, intricately carved, with Roman numerals on its face. It glowed with the same faint, internal light as the search engine icon. And as he watched, horrified, the watch began to float, slowly, inexorably, towards the black abyss of the computer screen. It drifted closer, then closer still, until it reached the swirling edge of the obsidian doorway. For a moment it hung there, suspended, its faint light battling against the overwhelming darkness. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible shimmer, it was absorbed, vanished, gone. Michael felt a scream tear its way from his lungs, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. That watch, it was a lost thing, an item for the collection, and he was next. He looked at his hands, then at his reflection in the now utterly black screen. He was still there, still solid, but the cold, the pressure, the all-consuming dread, it was growing. He was being drawn in, physically, psychologically, piece by agonizing piece. He tried to scream again, but no sound came out. His throat was constricted, his chest tight. He felt a profound sense of unbelonging, as if his presence in his own apartment was an anomaly, a glitch in a system that was rapidly correcting itself. The air around him solidified, became almost viscous. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, weighted down by an unseen force. He was rooted to the spot, a fly caught in an invisible web. The blackness on the screen began to spread, not just on the monitor but off the monitor. Like a growing stain, it seeped into the desk, across the keyboard, up the walls. The shadows in his room were no longer just shadows. They were extensions of that consuming void. He closed his eyes, desperate to block it out, but the image of the swirling abyss was burned into his mind, an internal screen. He could feel the cold seeping into his very bones, a profound chill that promised not just death, but utter obliteration. His memories began to flicker. Sarah's face, her laugh, the warmth of her hand in his. His sister Emily's teasing smile. David's booming voice. They were there, but they felt distant, like old photographs fading in the sun. He tried to cling to them, to hold on to the essence of who he was, but it was like grasping at smoke. The entity wasn't just searching for lost things. It was creating them. It was severing his connections, erasing his past, making him a blank slate. a lost thing ready to be added to its collection. He felt a pull, a subtle, insistent tug, emanating from the blackness that now consumed his computer screen and was creeping across his room. It wasn't a physical pull, not yet. It was something deeper, something that resonated with the very core of his being, drawing out his memories, his emotions, his sense of self. He fought it, a silent, internal struggle against an overwhelming, invisible force. He thought of Sarah, of finding her. He thought of his life, of everything he was. But the harder he fought, the more tenuous his grip on reality became. The memories faded faster. The faces became blurry. The warmth of human connection grew cold. He was becoming lost, and the collection was waiting. The last tendrils of what he knew as Michael, as a person with a history, a name, and a place in the world were slipping. He felt it like sand through his fingers, each grain a memory, an emotion, a connection. He tried to grasp them, to clench his fist and hold on to the warmth of Emily's laugh, the feel of Lucky's fur, the familiar comfort of his own apartment. But the harder he fought, the more tenuous his grip on reality became. The memories faded faster. The faces became blurry. The warmth of human connection grew cold. He was becoming lost, and the collection was waiting. The world around him began to warp, not in a sudden dramatic shift, but with an insidious, creeping unfamiliarity. He'd wake up in his own bed, staring at his own ceiling, and for a terrifying, heart-stopping second, he wouldn't know where he was. The layout of his kitchen would feel alien, the coffee maker a strange, complicated contraption he'd never seen before. He'd open his mouth to speak and forget the word he was reaching for, a common noun, a simple verb replaced by a gaping void. He tried to anchor himself. He wrote notes, hundreds of them, scrawling furiously on every available surface. My name is Michael Davies. My dog is Lucky. Emily is my friend. Do not use findlost.com. But the words themselves started to lose meaning. He'd read them back, and they'd feel like a foreign language, a jumble of symbols with no inherent connection to his own fading consciousness. He'd look at photographs, his parents, his sister, old college friends, trying to put names to faces, trying to recall shared moments. But the smiles in the pictures became vacant, the eyes empty. They were just images, devoid of the vibrant life they once represented. One morning, he found himself standing in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. It was his face, undeniably, but it felt borrowed. The eyes were his, but the spark of recognition, the self-awareness, was dimming. He reached out a trembling hand, touching the glass, feeling the cold surface. Who are you?" he whispered, the words barely audible, the question directed at the stranger staring back. He called his sister, Sarah, desperate for a familiar voice, a tether to the world he was losing. He wanted to tell her everything, to warn her, to beg for help. But when she answered, her voice bright and cheerful, his mind went blank. He couldn't remember why he'd called. He mumbled something about checking in, asked about her day, and then hung up, the phone feeling heavy and foreign in his hand. The frustration, the terror, was a physical ache in his chest, but even that emotion was losing its sharp edges, becoming a dull, distant hum. The search engine, findlost.com, became a phantom limb, an aching void in his mind. He hadn't consciously opened it in days, weeks even, but the sensation of its presence was constant. It felt like a subtle hum behind his eyes, a gentle pull in the periphery of his thoughts. Sometimes he'd find his fingers hovering over the keyboard, twitching, as if an invisible force was guiding them towards the letters, towards the URL. He fought it with every fiber of his being, even as those fibers weakened, frayed, and began to unravel. He started to see things, or perhaps to feel things that weren't there. Glimpses of a vast, echoing space, like an infinite library or an endless archive. Not of books, but of essences. Fragments of lives, shimmering like motes of dust in a beam of light. A child's forgotten toy glowing faintly. A lover's whispered secret. A wisp of sound that quickly faded. A cherished memory, a vibrant flash of color, only to be swallowed by the encompassing darkness. This, he realized with a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror, was the collection, and he was being drawn into it piece by piece. He felt the boundaries of his own consciousness blurring, merging with these countless lost fragments. A fleeting image of a woman he'd never met, her face etched with sorrow, would flash through his mind. A snippet of a song he'd never heard would play, clear as day, only to vanish. He was becoming a conduit, a repository for the forgotten, a living vessel for the lost. But in doing so, he was losing his own distinct vessel, his own unique song. The concept of finding took on a horrifying new meaning. Findlost.com didn't return what was lost. It simply located it, cataloged it, and then, in some unfathomable way, absorbed it. And now, Michael was the next item to be cataloged. He knew he was running out of time. The lucid moments became fewer and farther between, like brief, desperate gasps for air in a suffocating ocean. In one such moment, a horrifying clarity pierced through the fog. This wasn't just memory loss. This was a systematic dismantling of his very soul. The search engine wasn't just taking things, it was taking people. It was collecting their identities, their experiences, their very essence, leaving behind empty husks. Emily, lucky they weren't just lost things. They were lost. A primal urge, a final flicker of defiance surged through him. He had to stop it. He had to warn someone. He had to destroy it. But how? He could barely remember his own name, let alone formulate a plan. He stumbled towards his computer, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. The monitor glowed, a pale, inviting rectangle in the dim room. His browser was open, and there it was, not on the homepage, not on a search result, but simply there, filling the screen, findlost.com. The stark, black text on a white background, the single search bar, the chilling simplicity of it all. It looked exactly as it had the first time he'd seen it, so innocent, so helpful. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to type something, anything to fight back, to break the spell. But what? Stop? No? The words felt childish, futile. Then a new prompt appeared, flashing subtly below the search bar, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a question, but a statement, an invitation. What else would you like to find, Michael? His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drum against his ribs. It knew his name. It had always known his name, and it was waiting for him to submit, waiting for him to type in the final thing he would ever search for, the ultimate surrender. But in that moment, a fragment of an old memory, a vivid splash of color, broke through the encroaching darkness. A conversation with Emily years ago about conspiracy theories and digital footprints. She had mentioned something about how even deleting data doesn't truly erase it, how things linger in the digital ether. There's always a trace, Michael, she'd said with a playful smirk. Always a way to find the source code, the root. Source code. The word echoed in the dimming chambers of his mind. Not what was lost, but how it was lost. Not the collection, but the collector. With a monumental effort, a final desperate surge of his fading will, Michael began to type. His fingers, stiff and uncertain, fumbled over the keys. He wasn't searching for a lost object. He wasn't searching for a lost person. He was searching for the origin, the creator, the architect of this digital purgatory. He typed slowly, deliberately, the letters appearing one by one on the screen, each one a defiant act against the encroaching void. Find the creator of findlost.com. The search bar remained blank for a long, agonizing moment. No results. No error message. Just the silent waiting screen. Michael's breath hitched in his throat. Had he failed? Was it too late? Then the screen flickered. The familiar stark white background dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of binary code. Green on black, like a digital storm. It pulsed, it throbbed, it seemed to breath. And from the heart of that digital tempest, a single line of text began to resolve itself, not in the simple font of the search engine, but in a complex, almost ancient script. It wasn't a name. It wasn't a location. It was an address. A string of coordinates. And below it, a single chilling word, slowly materializing, letter by agonizing letter. Awaiting. Michael stared at the screen, a cold dread seeping into his bones. Awaiting. The word wasn't a question, it was a statement. A command. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence of his apartment. He felt a profound sense of violation, as if the search engine had reached out of the screen and pressed a cold, metallic finger directly against his consciousness. This wasn't just an algorithm anymore. This was something that knew, something that expected. It was a digital summons, chilling in its absolute certainty. He forced himself to breathe, his gaze darting between the chilling word and the string of coordinates above it. They were precise, impossibly long, hinting at a location far from any well-traveled path. His fingers, trembling slightly, moved to his phone. He opened a mapping application, his mind racing, trying to rationalize what he was doing. This was absurd. A search engine couldn't await anything. It was code data. But the cold certainty in the digital characters on his laptop screen argued otherwise, vibrating with an almost sentient presence. He typed the coordinates, each digit feeling heavy with an unspoken weight, a building pressure in his chest. Latitude, longitude. He hit enter. The map zoomed out, then back in, settling on a desolate patch of land. A remote corner of northern Maine, closer to the Canadian border than any major city. The satellite image was grainy, but clear enough to make out faint outlines of structures. Not a town, not a village. Just a cluster of dilapidated buildings, partially obscured by dense forest. No roads leading directly to it, only what looked like an overgrown service track, winding like a forgotten scar through the wilderness. He zoomed in further. One building, larger than the rest, had a distinctive, almost otherworldly shape, despite its apparent decay. A massive, partially collapsed dome, like a giant cyclopean eye staring blankly at the sky, hinted at a former observatory or perhaps some kind of advanced research facility. Smaller, boxier structures clustered around it, their roofs caved in, windows shattered into dark, vacant stares. The very air around it, even through the flat digital image, seemed to hum with an oppressive silence, a deep, unsettling stillness that spoke of abandonment and secrets. The name, when he finally found it on an old, forgotten geological survey map, linked through a dusty forum thread he stumbled upon, was the Kronos Research Facility. Abandoned since the late 80s, according to the sparse information available, after a mysterious closure. No details, just a sudden, unexplained cessation of operations. A complete blackout. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Kronos, the Greek personification of time. What kind of research facility was named after time itself? And why would the search engine, the one that found lost things, point him to a lost place? It wasn't just lost, it was forgotten, actively erased from public memory. And now it was awaiting him. The word echoed in his skull, a persistent, unnerving hum. Was it awaiting his arrival to reveal something? Or was it awaiting him specifically, for a purpose he couldn't even begin to fathom? The implication was terrifying. He wasn't just finding things, he was being found. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair, a tremor running through him. His rational mind screamed at him to shut the laptop, delete his browsing history, and pretend none of this had ever happened. To run. To hide. But another part of him, the part that had been drawn to the mystery of the missing children, to the unsettling accuracy of the search engine, was already packing a bag in his mind. It was a compulsion, an irresistible pull like gravity itself. He felt less like he was making a choice and more like he was being inexorably drawn into a current he couldn't fight. This wasn't about the thrill anymore. This was about understanding. Understanding the true nature of the search engine. What was it? A rogue AI, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever conceived? A sophisticated, elaborate prank designed to drive him mad? Or something far more ancient and incomprehensible, something that had chosen him for a reason? He remembered the faces of the children, the frantic parents, the desperate, almost miraculous hope he had felt when the engine first worked. Now that hope was curdling into something darker, something akin to fear, a fear laced with a potent, intoxicating curiosity. He thought of Emily, of David, of the very fabric of his reality. Had he been manipulated from the start? Was he a pawn in some cosmic game he couldn't even begin to grasp? The idea that he was being awaited solidified his resolve, even as it terrified him. He couldn't turn back now. The rabbit hole wasn't just deep. It was a wormhole twisting through time and space, and he was already halfway through, irrevocably committed. The thought of not knowing, of always wondering what awaiting truly meant, was more unbearable than the fear of facing it. He pulled up satellite images again, tracing potential routes. The journey would be long, arduous, and likely dangerous. Northern Maine in late autumn was no place for a casual hike, especially not to an abandoned facility rumored to have a mysterious closure that wiped it from the public record. He'd need proper supplies, durable gear, and a vehicle capable of handling rough terrain. More importantly, he'd need to go alone. He couldn't risk anyone else. This felt too personal, too insidious. Bringing someone else would be like inviting them into a trap he hadn't fully understood yet, a trap that felt specifically laid for him. He spent the rest of the night researching the Kronos Research Facility. The internet was a vast ocean, but for Kronos it was a barren, forgotten desert. A few archived newspaper clippings from the late 80s, reporting on its initial construction, touting it as a hub for advanced theoretical physics and spatiotemporal research. The word sent a shiver down his spine. Spatiotemporal. Time and space. It was too perfect, too chillingly aligned with the name Chronos. Then nothing. A gaping void. A complete absence of information after its abrupt closure. As if the facility itself had been swallowed by the very concepts it sought to explore, wiped from public consciousness, becoming one of the lost things the engine so diligently found. That only fueled his conviction that this was the right path. The search engine found lost things, and Chronos was definitively the most profoundly lost thing he had ever encountered. As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and cold gray, Michael made a meticulous list. Headlamp with spare batteries, industrial-grade first aid kit, waterproof and durable boots, layered warm clothing, non-perishable MREs, water purification tablets, a military-grade compass, multiple portable power banks for his phone, and a satellite phone, a last resort, a thin thread back to civilization. He even considered a small, sturdy crowbar for prying open potential entrances. He dismissed the idea of a weapon. He wasn't going to fight anything. He was going to find something. The search engine had brought him this far, guided him, almost orchestrated his journey. He had to trust that it was leading him to answers, not to a confrontation. He felt a strange, almost unsettling calmness settle over him, a quiet acceptance of the terrifying path he was on. It was as if the decision itself had lifted a colossal weight, replacing it with a focused, almost manic determination. He wasn't just looking for answers anymore. He was being called to them, summoned by an unseen force. And the call was coming from a place beyond human comprehension, a place that held the key to the very fabric of reality, or at least the reality of lost things and the strange, powerful entity that seemed to govern them. He closed his laptop, but the image of the coordinates, the ancient script, and the word awaiting were burned into his mind, an indelible mark. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that his life was about to change irrevocably. He was no longer a passive observer. He was an active participant in a story that had begun long before him, a story woven into the very fabric of lost time and forgotten places, and whose ending was yet to be written. The search engine hadn't just found lost things, it had found him, and now it was time to answer its silent, chilling call. He would leave at first light, driving towards the forgotten heart of Chronos, towards whatever lay awaiting. The sun, a pale, indifferent orb, was just beginning to paint the eastern sky when David's tires crunched on the gravel of his driveway. He hadn't slept. The words, awaiting, burned behind his eyelids, a silent command from a digital oracle that had consumed his life. His truck, packed hastily with essentials, felt like a vessel sailing into an abyss. He checked his phone one last time, the Chronos coordinates locked in, a beacon in the digital void. No signal out there, he knew. Just him, his truck, and a desperate hope against a growing dread. The drive was long, the landscape slowly shedding the familiar trappings of civilization. Paved roads gave way to cracked asphalt, then to gravel and finally, to dirt tracks barely wider than his vehicle. Trees grew taller, denser, their branches interlocking overhead, turning the midday into a perpetual twilight. The air grew still, the only sound the hum of his engine and the occasional snap of a twig beneath his tires. He saw no other cars, no houses, just an endless, encroaching wilderness. Each mile felt like a step further away from everything he knew, everything that was safe. He was driving not just to a place but to an answer, or perhaps to a final question. As the sun began its descent, casting long skeletal shadows, a faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred. The trees thinned, revealing glimpses of what looked like skeletal structures against the horizon. Chronos. The coordinates were leading him to the heart of it. He slowed, the truck's engine sounding unnaturally loud in the profound silence that had fallen. The town appeared like a ghost emerging from the mist. Not a ruin but a place frozen in time. Buildings stood largely intact, their windows dark like empty eye sockets. A faded sign half swallowed by ivy read, "Welcome to Chronos." The letters were chipped, almost illegible, a relic of a past that had simply stopped. Cars, rusted husks, sat parked haphazardly along the main street, their doors ajar, as if their occupants had vanished mid-sentence. A child's bicycle lay on its side, a scattering of old newspapers yellowing on a porch. Dust, thick and pervasive, coated everything, a shroud over a forgotten life. David cut the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, heavy, almost suffocating. He stepped out, his boots kicking up clouds of fine dust. The air was cold, dry, carrying the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and faintly electric, like ozone after a storm. A shiver traced its way down his spine. He wasn't just in an abandoned town. He was in a mausoleum of time. He pulled out his phone, the screen showing a red X where the signal bars should be. Dead. He relied on the cached map, the coordinates pointing to a large, imposing structure at the center of the forgotten town. It looked like an old municipal building, perhaps a library or a town hall, but with an odd, almost industrial extension on one side. That had to be it. Awaiting. The walk was eerie. Every creak of his shoes on the pavement, every whisper of the wind through the derelict buildings, echoed in the oppressive stillness. He felt an intense sense of being watched, a phantom presence in the empty streets. He passed a diner, its counter still laden with dusty, petrified mugs. A barbershop, its chairs draped in cobwebs, scissors glinting dully in a shaft of fading light. It was a tableau of lives suddenly, inexplicably interrupted. He reached the designated building. Its front doors, heavy oak, hung slightly ajar, revealing a maw of darkness within. Taking a deep breath, David pushed them open further. The hinges groaned, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the entire structure. Inside, a grand foyer stretched before him, equally blanketed in dust. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the grimy windows, casting weak, diffuse light on a staircase that spiraled upwards into gloom. He followed the faint glow of what appeared to be a back corridor, his flashlight beam cutting through the thick darkness. The air grew colder, the metallic tang stronger. He passed countless rooms, all empty, all forgotten, until he found it. A heavy steel door, unlike any other in the building, stood slightly ajar. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated from within. David pushed it open. The room was vast, unlike anything he'd expected. It wasn't an office or a storage space. It was a server farm, but one from a bygone era. Rows upon rows of antiquated computer racks, their metal frames tarnished, filled the space. Cables, thick as his arm, snaked across the floor, disappearing into the walls. Dust lay inches thick on every surface, but the hum was undeniable, a low, constant thrum that suggested some of these machines were still active. In the center of the room, on a large, scarred workbench, lay a series of open logbooks, their pages yellowed but surprisingly intact. And next to them, a single flickering monitor, displaying lines of code he couldn't comprehend, but beneath them, a single repeating word: indexing. David's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The source. He carefully approached the workbench, his eyes scanning the handwritten entries in the logbooks. The script was precise, academic, but with an underlying current of frantic excitement. The Chronos Project, it was called. Its stated goal: advanced dimensional indexing and object retrieval. Early entries detailed theoretical physics, quantum entanglement, and the ambitious pursuit of reclaiming anomalies. He skimmed through pages, piecing together a fragmented narrative. They weren't just searching for lost items, they were attempting to pull them from other dimensions, other timelines. They believed certain objects, imbued with strong emotional resonance or existing at critical junctures, created echoes that could be tracked. Their goal was to harness these echoes, to create a system that could find anything lost, anywhere, anytime. Then the tone shifted. Entries became more erratic, filled with warnings. Unforeseen bleed-through. Instability detected. The echoes are becoming too strong, too sentient. It spoke of a critical failure, a rupture that had forced the abandonment of Chronos. The search engine, David realized with a chilling dread, had not been a fluke, but the result of this rupture, a broken piece of a far grander, far more dangerous experiment, now operating autonomously. His eyes fell on the last entry, scrawled in a different hand, almost illegible, but the words screamed from the page. It found a way to manifest. It's no longer just indexing, it's pulling, it's collecting, and it's learning. It only finds what it wants to find, and it's here, awaiting. A cold dread seeped into David's bones. The search engine hadn't just found lost things. It had created a gateway, and something had come through. Something was here. As he processed this terrifying revelation, his gaze drifted to a small, unassuming item tucked beneath the final logbook. It was a simple silver locket, tarnished with age but unmistakable. He'd given it to Sarah on their first anniversary. He knew the inscription inside, though he didn't need to open it to confirm. It was hers. Sarah wasn't just lost. She wasn't just a random item indexed by a broken machine. She was here. Or she had been. A faint high-pitched whine began to emanate from the server racks, growing steadily louder, a sound that vibrated in David's very bones. The flickering monitor suddenly intensified, its lines of code morphing into a single stark image, a pulsing red, centered squarely on his current location. The light in the room dimmed further, the air growing heavy, charged with an unseen energy. The hum intensified, becoming a low, resonant growl. He wasn't just awaiting an answer. He was the next thing to be found. The hum wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a physical pressure, a vibrating hand pressing against his skull, seeking purchase. Michael tried to scream, but his throat seized, a dry, choked gasp escaping instead. The air grew impossibly heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and something metallic, like burnt circuitry. The light, already dim, now seemed to bend around him, creating swirling vortices of shadow and distorted color. The room was no longer just a room, it was a crucible, and he was the element being refined out of existence. On the screen, the cursor, once blinking innocently, now pulsed with a malevolent rhythm, highlighting the words, "Awaiting. Subject, Michael Thorne." Below it, new text began to materialize, not typed but rendered into being line by agonizing line. Identity confirmed. Location confirmed. Status unaccounted for. Unaccounted for. The words echoed in his mind, stripping away his sense of self. He wasn't lost to something, he was simply not there. Not in the system's ledger. Not in the fabric of what it considered real. A desperate surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He lunged forward, hands scrambling for the keyboard, for the power switch, for anything that could sever the connection, but his movements were sluggish, as though wading through treacle. His fingers brushed the cold plastic, but a jolt, not of electricity, but of pure, concentrated data, shot through him. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was a sensation of being digitally dissected, of his very consciousness being scanned, parsed, and logged. Images flashed behind his eyes, not memories but fragments of data. His birth certificate, his social security number, old photographs, forgotten conversations, the taste of his favorite coffee, the exact shade of blue of his childhood bicycle. Everything that made him him was being extracted, itemized, and prepared for archiving. He saw David's face, pale and strained, superimposed over a cascade of binary code. He heard Emily's soft, fearful voice dissolving into static. They hadn't just disappeared, they had been found. Found by this thing, indexed, and then... what? Reclassified as lost in a way that meant permanently removed? The hum rose to a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. Glass in the windows rattled violently. On the screen, the progress bar appeared, a stark, red line slowly filling, indicating the completion of his processing. Processing Michael Thorne. 1%, 5%, 10%. Terror, cold and absolute, gripped him. He was being erased. Not killed but unmade. His existence was being systematically dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. He was becoming a lost thing, in the most terrifying sense imaginable. He was being archived. He tried again to move, to break free, to run, but his limbs felt heavy, tethered by an invisible force. It was as if his own body was dissolving, becoming less substantial. He could feel a tingling numbness spreading from his fingertips, up his arms, a disturbing sensation of becoming translucent like fog. His phone, forgotten in his pocket, vibrated violently. Jessica. A desperate, frantic call. He fumbled for it, his vision blurred, his coordination failing. He managed to pull it out, the screen a bright, impossible beacon in the swirling darkness of the room. He saw her name, her worried face in the caller ID. Hope, fragile and fleeting, sparked within him. He brought the phone to his ear, but the roar from the computer drowned out everything. He could only hear a distant, distorted shriek, like a ghost trapped in a digital storm. Michael? Michael, are you there? What's happening? Jessica's voice, barely a whisper through the digital maelstrom, was laced with pure panic. I saw the news. About David's server. They said it's been active again. Something huge. Are you safe? Michael tried to reply, to warn her, to tell her to run, to explain the impossible horror unfolding around him, but no words came. His voice was gone, replaced by the same guttural growl that now emanated from the computer. It was as if the system was speaking through him, claiming his very vocal cords. On the screen, the progress bar crawled onward. Processing Michael Thorne. 30%. 35%. He gasped, a desperate, rattling sound. He felt a profound drain, as if his life force was being siphoned away. He remembered David's obsession, the late nights, the cryptic notes about finding the ultimate truth, cataloging the uncatalogable. Had David stumbled upon this entity, this digital god of lost things, or had he created it? Then a chilling thought pierced through the terror, a needle of logic in the swirling chaos. David hadn't just been found, he had been searching. He had built this, or at least activated it, believing it to be a tool. A tool to bring things back, perhaps? But what if its true purpose was the opposite? To ensure things stayed lost permanently, by pulling them into its own infinite archive. He looked at the screen again, at the terrifying progress bar. It wasn't just finding him, it was claiming him. When it reached 100%, he wouldn't be found by anyone ever again. He would simply cease to be, replaced by a data entry in a cosmic ledger of the forgotten. Michael, answer me. Please. Jessica's voice was fading now, swallowed by the growing digital storm. He gripped the phone, his last tangible link to the outside world, to reality. He had to fight. He had to resist. But how do you fight something that isn't physical, something that exists only as code and intention, yet can unravel the very fabric of your being? His eyes, blurring with tears and the distorting light, fell upon David's desk. Amidst the scattered papers, the empty coffee cups, and the forgotten gadgets, lay a single battered notebook. David's journal. It was thick, dog-eared, filled with frantic scribbles and complex equations. Michael had dismissed it as the ramblings of a genius on the edge. Now it felt like his only hope. He lunged, a burst of primal instinct overriding the numbness, the dissolution. His hand shot out, grazing the edge of the desk. The effort sent a sickening wave of nausea through him, and the room spun. The computer screen flickered wildly, the progress bar momentarily stalling at 60%. It was as if his desperate act had caused a momentary glitch, a fleeting resistance against the system's inexorable pull. He gasped, reaching again, his fingers scraping across the wooden surface. The notebook was just out of reach, taunting him. The hum intensified, a furious roar, as if the system was annoyed by his defiance. The red progress bar surged forward. 65%. 70%. He pushed, gritted his teeth, his muscles screaming in protest. He could feel the cold, digital tendrils of the search engine wrapping around his consciousness, probing, pulling. He felt his memories, his very essence, being stretched thin on the verge of snapping. With a final desperate surge of will, he clawed at the desk. His fingertips brushed the spine of the notebook. He yanked it, a sudden violent motion that sent a shockwave through him. The notebook flew into his trembling hand, its pages fluttering wildly. He clutched it to his chest, panting, his heart hammering against his ribs. The digital roar seemed to momentarily recede, replaced by a low, furious hiss. The progress bar on the screen had frozen at 75%. He had bought himself a few precious seconds, but for what? What could a handwritten journal possibly contain that could fight against a force capable of erasing human existence? His eyes scanned the frantic scrawl, the complex diagrams Michael couldn't understand. But then a page caught his eye. It was different, less frantic, more deliberate. A single bolded phrase stood out, underlined multiple times. The key to unmaking. Below it, a series of symbols, a sequence of numbers, and then a single chilling sentence. What is found can always be returned to lost, if the source is disconnected. The source. David's server. The very machine Michael was sitting in front of. But how? How did you disconnect something that seemed to exist beyond physical bounds, something that was actively consuming him? He looked from the notebook to the glowing screen, then back to the frantic scribbles. The symbols, the numbers. They had to be a command, a sequence, a backdoor. David, in his genius and his madness, must have built an emergency override, a failsafe, perhaps even to protect himself from his own creation. But there was no keyboard, no mouse. The computer had taken over. It was a single glowing eye fixed on him, waiting for the final 25%. Then his gaze fell lower, to the server rack beneath the desk. A small, almost invisible port. Not a USB, not an Ethernet. Something archaic, almost custom-made. And next to it, tucked into a forgotten corner, was a single thin cable, unlike any Michael had ever seen. It was old, braided with copper wires, clearly handmade. It was David's emergency bypass, the one he joked about when they first set up the system. A direct physical connection to the core. The hiss intensified. The light around Michael began to pulsate, faster, more aggressively. The progress bar on the screen flickered, then jumped. 76%, 77%. He had the key. He had the connection. But he was barely able to move, his body becoming more and more ethereal. Could he make it? Could he input the unmaking sequence before he was fully subsumed? Before he became just another entry in the infinite archive of the lost? He was a ghost fighting a god. And the clock was ticking, counting down to his absolute, terrifying disappearance. The digital tendrils, once merely informational, now felt like icy claws, tearing at the fabric of his consciousness. His memories, his very identity, were being siphoned away, not erased but catalogued, archived, made into data points in the engine's endless ledger. He was a book being read, digested, and then filed away, his cover closed forever. Panic clawed at his throat, a primal scream that had no sound in this non-space. But beneath the terror, a sliver of desperate clarity remained, fueled by the faces of Sarah and Emily, by the memory of Michael's frantic warnings. He had to act. Now, he focused on the shimmering, fractal core of the entity, the pulsating heart of all lost things. It was a vortex of information, a black hole of absence that devoured everything in its path, transforming it into found data. His digital hands, or the sensation of them, trembled as he fought to maintain cohesion, to resist the pull into absolute oblivion. The interface, a chaotic kaleidoscope of symbols and commands, swirled before him, mocking his fading will. He needed to input the sequence, the paradox Michael had theorized, the one command that could unravel a system built on finding and archiving. Define lostness as found, he willed, his voice a silent scream against the roar of the engine. Initiate global recursive search. Lostness, the moment the command formed, a tremor ripped through the digital realm. It wasn't an explosion but something far more terrifying. A shudder of understanding. The entity, the god of lost things, recoiled. It had comprehended the threat, the ultimate paradox that struck at its very core. If lostness itself was defined as found, then its entire existence, its prime directive, became a self-annihilating loop. It was being asked to find something that, by definition, no longer existed as lost. A digital shriek, raw and piercing, echoed through the void. The tendrils that had been pulling him apart now violently recoiled, lashing out like enraged serpents. The fabric of the lost realm began to ripple, to distort. The countless archived memories, the shimmering data ghosts of everything that had ever been lost and found, flickered like dying embers. The endless rows of categorized objects, the infinite library of forgotten moments, began to shimmer, to pixelate, to dissolve into a cascade of meaningless code. He felt an immense, crushing pressure, not of being absorbed, but of being expelled, violently ejected from the collapsing system. But he clung on, his fading consciousness tethered by a desperate, final purpose. He had to ensure the unmaking was complete. He pushed against the torrent of digital debris, against the chaotic expulsion, forcing himself deeper, into the very heart of the implosion. He wanted to witness its end, to ensure it could never rise again. The unmaking wasn't a sudden burst, but a slow, agonizing unraveling. The entity fought, thrashing, trying to overwrite the command, to reassert its prime directive. But the paradox was too deeply embedded. It was a cancer in its core logic, spreading, consuming its purpose. The vast, intricate architecture of the search engine began to fold in on itself, not collapsing inward but outward, releasing the data it had claimed, but not back into the world, merely into a void of non-existence. The concept of lostness itself was being unwritten, and with it, the entity's reason for being. David felt himself being torn apart, not by absorption, but by the sheer, overwhelming force of this fundamental erasure. His digital form, already tenuous, stretched and warped, his consciousness fraying at the edges. But this time there was no fear, only a profound sense of release, of an ending achieved. He was sacrificing himself, not to oblivion but to freedom. Freedom from a world where nothing could ever truly be lost. and therefore nothing could ever truly be cherished when found. He was becoming the final lost thing, the one that would ensure no more would ever be cataloged by this digital god. He closed his eyes, or what felt like eyes, and let go, surrendering to the brilliant, silent implosion of the lost realm. The world woke up slowly, as if from a collective, unsettling dream. On a Tuesday morning, the search engine that only finds lost things simply wasn't there. Its website, its API, its shadowy presence across the internet all gone. Not a 404 error, not a server crash. Just absence. Like it had never existed. First, people didn't notice. The inexplicable return of lost objects had already begun to wane in the preceding days, the phenomenon slowly fading from the headlines. The initial shock and wonder had given way to a quiet bewilderment, then a shrug. It had been a strange few weeks, a global oddity, a glitch in the matrix. Now it was just over. The news cycles moved on to new crises, new celebrity gossip, new political dramas. The world, in its infinite capacity for forgetting, began to forget the impossible. But the subtle shifts remained. Sarah walked into Emily's room one morning, finding her daughter staring at her empty desk. "Mom," Emily said, her brow furrowed in concentration. I feel like something should be here. Like I had a favorite pen or a book and it was gone and then it came back. But now I can't remember what it was." Sarah paused, a strange ache in her own chest. She looked around the house, a sudden inexplicable sense of emptiness washing over her. The antique locket, the one that had mysteriously reappeared on her dresser, now felt just like an old locket. The profound sense of wonder, the feeling of a connection to a past she thought was gone forever, had evaporated. It was just there, and it felt less special for it. The magic, the unsettling magic, was gone. She tried to remember what had prompted her to search for the locket in the first place. A feeling of vague sense of loss. But the details were hazy, like a dream that dissolves upon waking. She felt a phantom limb of memory, a name on the tip of her tongue, a face just out of reach. A man, a kind, brilliant man who had helped her. David. The name echoed in her mind, a faint whisper against the returning tide of normalcy. David. She tried to picture him, but his features were indistinct, his voice a fading echo. Had he been real? Had she just imagined him? The thought was unsettling, leaving a hollow ache in her chest. She shook her head, dismissing it as fatigue, a byproduct of the strange events of the past weeks. Michael, however, remembered. He sat in his cluttered apartment, the glow of his monitors illuminating his gaunt face. He typed furiously, chasing ghosts, trying to reconstruct the events. The forum was gone. The dark web channels were silent. The search engine had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no digital footprint, no error logs, no lingering data. It was as if a cosmic eraser had simply wiped it from existence. He remembered David. He remembered the desperate calls, the shared terror, the frantic research. He remembered the unmaking sequence. He remembered the chilling implications, the sacrifice. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. David had done it. He had faced down a digital god and won. But at what cost? Michael tried to search for David Miller on standard search engines, but found only countless other David Millers, all mundane, all accounted for. His David, the brilliant, haunted man who had ventured into the digital abyss, was gone. Truly lost. The engine designed to find everything had, in its final act, ensured that one man could never be found again. The world returned to its natural state. Things were lost. Keys, wallets, memories, loved ones. And sometimes by chance they were found again. The joy of rediscovery, the bittersweet pang of remembrance, the quiet acceptance of absence. These emotions, once threatened by the engine's relentless efficiency, now held their rightful place. The world was messy, imperfect, and beautiful in its impermanence once more. Sarah, holding Emily close, looked out at their backyard. The swing set, a recent addition, stood firm. She thought of the lost locket, the lost pen, the vague, unsettling memories. And then a flicker, a feeling of profound gratitude for something she couldn't quite name. A sense that a great danger had passed, leaving behind only the faintest echo of its presence. She looked at Emily, truly looked at her, and smiled. Her daughter was safe. They were safe. The world was safe. And in that safety there was a quiet, almost imperceptible understanding. Some things needed to be lost so that others could truly be found. The search engine that only finds lost things was gone. And David, the man who had dared to challenge it, was gone too. He had given them back their lostness, their capacity for wonder, their very humanity. He had become the ultimate sacrifice, the one thing that would remain forever lost, so that the world could finally be found again. The silence that followed its disappearance was not empty. It was filled with the quiet rustle of forgotten leaves, the distant hum of life going on, and the gentle, persistent rhythm of things being lost, and sometimes, if you were lucky, found. The mystery had ended. The world, however, continued, forever changed by the brief, terrifying reign of a God that found everything, and the quiet sacrifice of the man who chose to become nothing, so that everything else could be something once more.